Welcome to the Uncovered podcast. I'm Jarrod Kimber. With me is Behram Qazi, and we're going to talk about the week in cricket. I suppose that means this week, Behram, that it's IPL. As there's a little bit of other news. There's things that have happened, but certainly I think the most important thing right at the moment is the fact that we know which teams are going home from the IPL, if nothing else. There was a really important game. I'm trying to remember back. I think Mumbai had lost their first 2 games of the year. Does that sound right? And then they had to play Delhi just after that. And I said at the time, that was basically whether we're going to see the end of Mumbai or not. They won that game and they've ended up in the finals, which is a phenomenal effort from where they were realistically. And almost all the teams in the finals, probably RCB's a little bit, the only one that sort of outside of this was in pretty good form coming in. Whereas all the other teams, I mean, just a huge shout out to the Sunrisers for managing to actually get to a point where they had all but secured not getting last and still ended up in last spot. But Titans, CSK, that's the first playoff game. Of course, we'll talk about that in a moment. LSG and Mumbai is the the eliminator. Is that what they call it? I think that's what they call it. Yeah,
that's what they call it. Yep.
I probably talked about this before. A funny fact said the final structure of this tournament is stolen from Australian rules football and rugby league. And it comes from a very similar thing where back in the day they used to have 10 teams and they had 4 finalists, and when one plays 4, if 4 beats 1, everyone goes, well, what's the point of having a regular season if you could just finish 4th and then end up in the final? Weirdly enough, the Big Bash still does that, by the way. But it's a really, really random sort of thing from that point of view. When I try to explain to my wife what a preliminary final is, she gets very angry. More often than not, her lawyer brain doesn't really accept that at all. Let's just, before we get to the finalists, who's the team that you're most disappointed in for not making it? I feel like it's going to be Rajasthan, but I'll let you make up your own mind.
It definitely is Rajasthan. So I've always liked Rajasthan just because of that first season, right? Like you had Pakistani players in it.
Because I had Pakistani players. I love it.
You had Sohail Tanveer as the MVP. Kamran Akmal scored a few good knocks. Yunus Khan was weirdly enough playing in that team. Then you had, of course, Shane Warne and Shane Watson, 2 Aussies that I absolutely adored. Graham Smith, another cricketer that I loved. So that was a team. And Prime Yusuf Pathan, right? Remember how good he was? So I used to love the Rajasthan Royals, and after a long time, they had a bunch of players who I also admired. I am a big fan of Joss Butler. I like any team with Ravi Ashwin. He keeps things interesting. I think Chahal is one of the best spinners in India, definitely wrist spinners, I would say. And then you also had young talents like Yashasvi Jaiswal, who had a brilliant season, one to remember for him. And then Trent Bolt, one of the best new ball bowlers, left arm seamer, unique, skill set. And they were 6 wins out of 7 games, if I'm not wrong, something like that, right? So the drop from that point onwards was just absolutely catastrophic. And I honestly cannot believe it. Even right till the end, they had some semblance of hope. Because if both RCB and Mumbai lost their games, I reckon Rajasthan had a shot to make it on run rate. But then again, they had this in their own hands and they got it to a point where they were relying on other teams. And that in itself is a big loss. And I am very, very disappointed because with that lineup of players where you're very much sorted for every position, right? You've got the openers. Sanju Samson is a veteran now. Sure, you got Joe Root. I don't know what to make of that one. But
I mean, that was the Joe Root thing's interesting because that's almost the point. I'm like, I don't understand what problem Joe Root is trying to solve here, other than the fact that they are trying to make their batting go as long as possible. But when Joe Root comes in, they create other issues for themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even if he'd been successful, I'm not sure it really made as much sense as they were thinking it would.
Yeah, no, especially when you've got Shimron Hetmeyer in that team. So in a team where you're going to get starts, it's inevitable that you will. Even though Butler has 5 ducks, that's a new IPL record. And that is on its own is mind-blowing. But, Jaiswal was clicking and Sanju Samson was scoring runs. You're not going to get a lot of opportunities where Joe Root is going to have a good entry point to go and do some, live up to his skill set, which is probably better suited to top of the order. So when you've got Hetmeyer, it doesn't make sense to have a Joe Root in the team. But I'm more disappointed with the bowling attack, right? They had the bowlers to at least make it to the playoffs. You had Trent Bolt, who's been successful, who was successful over here. Ravi Ashwin and Yuzvendra Chahal are two of the best Indian spinners. Maybe the other Ashwin, I'm not too convinced with. And he was like a full toss bowling machine in the middle over there. Might have cost them a game or two. But yeah, I am seriously disappointed in Rajasthan. And I was really hoping to see them at least make it to the playoffs because they were finalists last year, right? And we were talking about this in my first uncovered uncovered debut, that they look like the team that, could go all the way if they just get a few things right. But they got everything wrong.
It's interesting. You talk about the bowling. So they lost Prasidh Krishna before the season, right? And they lucked into Sandeep Sharma. He did okay. I think up until the point where he bowled that no ball and lost the game at the end, he was having a pretty good bowling season. But to be honest, there weren't many bowlers at all that had particularly good bowling seasons this year. Trent Bolt, absolutely fine. Like, I mean, he didn't tear anyone apart, but he was fine. As you said, Chahal I think it's something that I've been really obsessed over, is the fact that Chahal seems to dominate the wicket taking list almost every year and doesn't get the hype that so many other players do. And when you look at it, it's just ridiculous how many wickets he's taken. As you said, Ashwin, another decent year with the ball. Look, I think their biggest problem was Jason Holder, who...
Yep.
And this is the same issue that they've had for ages, right? They've never really had an all-rounder. And so they're trying to sort of fix all these problems. They know their batting lineup isn't long enough. And so in order to do that, you play Jason Holder as a bowler. And Jason Holder, I think we have more than enough evidence now of knowing he's going to go at 10 runs and over. But usually he takes a lot of wickets. This year, I just want to try to find the numbers here. He bowled 28 overs and took 4 wickets. His average was 71, and he's been consistently one of the better wicket takers in not just IPL, but in all formats, right? Anywhere he plays, he takes a lot of wicket. The problem is, if you're asking one player to be that important to you, and it comes back to the Butler thing, right? Again, if Butler has a good second half of the season, doesn't set a new Courtney Walsh, Danny Morrison record, that's one for the old heads. If he has a good second half of the season, a lot of these problems go away. The problem is that so many times with Rajasthan, that's what you're looking at, right? So you look at their top batters. Obviously, Jaiswal, incredible, right? Hetmeyer, again, incredible. Sampson, very, very good season. Then you get down to Butler. A low season for him, but not a low season, right? He averages 28 with a strike rate of 139. Look, it's fine. Yes, he had more ducks than 50s. But if you're getting that out of your overseas player, as long as the strike rate's still high, it's okay, even if not ideal. Devdutt Padikkal averages 26, 130. Again, not too bad. But then you've got guys like, Jarrell, who I think made most of his runs in like one innings. Ashwin averaged 11. Holder, I think, only batted a couple of times and didn't make many. So they're not really pushing through their order that much, right? And they don't have that strength. And, it's been going on for ages. I remember, and, Rian Parag is such an interesting cricketer because they have invested so much time in him now. And I get it. Like, he looks like a professional cricketer. He looks like an IPL level cricketer, but he doesn't make any runs and he can't bowl, right? Like, at a certain point, I don't know what to do. He's a perfect example of, I would love to see Rian Parag in, like, I don't know, the New Zealand League, right? Or some other random league in the world to see how he goes. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, other than the fact that you're obsessed with them, I think they are the most interesting team just because of the way that they dropped off. The other one is RCB, right? I remember I went onto Twitter yesterday and, I watched a little bit of the game and was sort of dipping in and out. I was going to watch the full game later on. And I noticed that, like, there were all these tweets about King Kohli and all this sort of stuff because he made 100. And I get it. It's Virat Kohli and people get excited when he does good things. That's what happens with good players. I saw LeBron James hit 2 3-pointers against the Denver Nuggets and suddenly Denver was going to lose, right? That's how people think. But there was a part of me that was like, well, everyone's made 100 this year. I'm not saying they're less special because I still think it's incredible. But also, they still lost that game, right? It's still the same basic thing of, King Kohli's back. You're 7-7, right?
Yeah.
This is a decent kind of team. When you look at it, I think those two are if I was looking at those two, and I've just done the exit interviews on them, it's not particularly easy to work out how you fix their issues. So, for instance, Punjab's really interesting. I think that'll be in the exit interview I've done tomorrow. Punjab have 4 death bowlers. They have Rabada, Curran, Arshdeep, and Nathan Ellis, right? In some ways, you're like, why did they end up with 4 death bowlers? What was the thinking behind this? Were they all supposed to play together? But the other side of that is, well, okay, if you've now got a trade chip, right? Sam Curran is still going to be worth money. He still made runs. Arshdeep, they're not going to get rid of. He's had one bad year. I'm more than okay with that. Rabada finally had to not take as many wickets as he had in previous times. And Nathan Ellis had a really good year. That means that out of Sam Curran, Rabada, and Ellis, you have a trade chip to be able to get your team better. I look at RCB in Rajasthan and I wonder what that is. Like, they're going to have to rely on players changing in form, or Jason Holder coming back, or Ashwin making more runs again. I'm not exactly sure where they go.
Yeah, I don't really know what the solution would be for Rajasthan, because that is a real, numbs my brain, really. But if you talk about RCB, Faf had an amazing year with the bat. Leading run scorer, scored his runs at a very decent clip, scored runs regularly, led the side well. And then, of course, Kohli is always going to be Kohli, and he scored back-to-back hundreds. One of those was a match-winning effort versus the Sunrisers, and one of them was in a losing cause. And, you talked about the tweets of King Kohli and everything, but I saw some tweets in which he was getting some flack as well, that on the Chinnaswamy, you have not scored 200 and you are 15 short. And ultimately, Shubman Gill made it look like they were 15 short, right? And it was just like a very iconic moment as well. I like the fact that, the newer generation, or Shubman Gill in particular, who is the flag bearer of Indian batting going into the future, he replicated Kohli's effort and, led his team to the top spot. I mean, they already had that secured. And Gujarat, credit to them for playing their first 11 in a useless game. So that's another thing that I guess people would be scratching their heads over. But what Gill showed us was that the next generation is, the firepower is clearly a lot more. You look at their strike rates.
Just playing T20 cricket. Gill. In the style, right? Like, that's what you're basically
156,
saying.
160, that's what they're striking at on average, and that's ridiculous. And Kohli, I mean, his power game is good. If you compare to, let's say, Babar Azam, Kohli has a better power game.
Yeah.
But Kohli also has been traditionally an anchor. You talk about true averages and true strike rates. Kohli's always the guy who has a higher true average.
Yeah.
So, I do like Virat Kohli a lot. I think that if he wants to play for India in the next World Cup, I mean, he'll probably get an automatic ticket. But if he wants to go into that World Cup as a strong or leading contender with the bat, then he has to amplify his game a bit, or maybe look at some avenues. But ultimately with RCB, not the Royal Bank of Canada. Ultimately with RCB, I feel like Faf, Kohli, then you got Maxwell, who was, good in patches, and then Siraj was decent. Apart from those 4 guys, I don't think anyone performed. There was that Lomro guy. I think he played well in one game. He won them a game. And that's where the buck stops.
Yeah, Lomro, he made runs in one game, but he's not going to solve anything based on everything I've seen. Rorat doesn't really have the power. Hasaranga hasn't made any runs at the IPL so far.
I feel like if Hasaranga was picked up by Chennai, it would be a completely different story. It's just that the fact that he gets to play his home games at the Chinnaswamy, it doesn't really help him, because a lot of people.
Yeah, but you say that. I've just said he didn't make any runs, right? Like, you're right when it comes to bowling. If he played on another game, look, I mean, he had a great year last year. I'm not terrified of what happened with his bowling, but we've now had enough where we look at his batting and I'm thinking, is this going to translate? I've seen him bat. In fact, I've told this story before. When first time I saw him play, I think he was playing for Sri Lanka very early on in his career. And I contacted a friend of mine who I thought might be his agent. And I said, are you repping this guy? And he's like, yeah. And I said, you're going to make millions. This is incredible. This guy can hit sixes and he can spin the ball both ways. And he's a proper bowler. It's not like he's a part-timer. But none of that batting has translated yet. And maybe it does in a couple of years. But that's another problem for them. What else was I going to say about... I think that RCB have still got the same issue they've always got. They invest all their money in 3 batters, right? And it's always that... This is the same issue they've had from the beginning of time. As you said, I thought Mohammad Siraj is this year. He's gone at 7.5 runs and over. I haven't looked at the the final true economy rates, my guess is he'd be close to the best bowler. This is the most expensive IPL season ever, and it's not even close, right? I think it's had double the amount of 200-run games as any other tournament ever has.
It's already had the most number of boundaries or sixes, and we're still, just done with the group stage. So there are lots of sixes yet to come.
It's been ridiculous from that point of view. So it's been absolutely huge from that view. But you look at it, and Hasaranga, let's say he has a bounce back year, and I'd say Harshal Patel is the other one. You say they have bounce back years. They've then got Sharma, who went at 10 runs and over. There isn't anyone there particularly who I would want to rush in. What's his name? Vaishak. He went at 11 runs and over, didn't he? I can't even find him on my list. He's actually gone off my list. Like I love Wayne Parnell for the fact that I reckon I saw Wayne Parnell first play like 100 years ago. And
he was in the 2009 World Cup. He was one of the star bowlers in the 2009 T20 World Cup.
I think he was signed to Kent when I came over to cover county cricket in 2008. He's just been around for so long, so you're right. And I think it's great. But if you're mid-tournament going to Wayne Parnell, I think there's probably a problem with the way that you have set up your squad in this particular case. There's a couple of comments as well. Pratik Jha, he's put a couple of comments in. He's saying Rajasthan Royals middle overs batting average was bad. Maybe they want a route to solve that. I think when you look at their middle batting, if Root is coming in, it's really the local players that I don't think you can continue to overcome that if you've already got Hetmeyer and you've got Butler at the other end, right? The problem here is that they haven't been able to find local batters that are good for a long time. To be fair, Jaiswal is at least covering a big portion of that. But I just wanted to move on to Anwish's comment here. He says, how do you rate Russell's season? Obviously, he won't reach 2019 level. So the exit interview comes out about him tomorrow. But here's one for you. Just off the top of your head, how many normal runs per over do you think that Russell went for this year? Just normal, his normal economy.
Anwish, or is this for me?
No, this is for you.
Oh, I would say
Anwish can't answer. He's not on the show. He just put up a comment. I don't know if you know how YouTube works.
Yeah, I'd say in and around 10, 11. Something like that.
11.34.
Yeah.
Right? But here's where it gets more complicated. Because I was like, oh, that's terrible. He only bowled 15.1 overs. Right? So they're not using him. And he's getting smashed. And usually takes a lot of wickets. And he didn't do that. I put it in the video tomorrow. I don't see how they can continue with Russell and Narain if they're both pretending like they're still both all-rounders. You can use Russell probably in 2 or 3 important games, maybe if you have an injury mid-game or something else happens. But his bowling's almost done. He just doesn't have the juice left in his knees. And he's been going at 9.5 runs, 10 runs and over for a long time. And he maybe doesn't quite have the speed now to get the consistent wickets that he used to have. Sunil Narine has not made runs in the IPL for 3 years. Right, he's actually regressed back to the batter he was when he was a number 10 and 11 back early in his career, and this happens. I mean, Brad Hogg, a friend of the network, Brad Hogg. I remember talking to George Bailey, and I was saying, "Why are you batting Brad Hogg at number 11 in the 2012 World Cup?" George Bailey said, "Jarrod, he's old. He's really old. Like he was a batter when he was young. Now he's old." And Sunil Narine was never even a batter when he was young, right? So. They are picking both of those players like they're all-rounders. So when you ask me about Russell's season, I think his batting was fine. I think he definitely gets another season as a full-time batter. But you have to start going, if you want both of them in your team, you have to say that Sunil Narine is a full-time bowler and Andre Russell is a full-time batter. And if you're not doing that, I think you're probably thinking about this all incorrectly.
Yeah, just one more thought before we move on to something else. You also mentioned Punjab. I think out of the 3 teams, they are the most fixable. And why I say that is because I think that they have got a really strong core of both local talent. And I like the English boys, right? I like Sam Curran. I like Liam Livingston. And you can argue that Livingston did his bit, He did what he could. They had fate in their own hands and they lost to Delhi and out-of-form Rajasthan. That's entirely on Punjab. If there's any area that they need to improve on, is that all of their bowlers are death bowlers. Because if you look at Prabh Simran and Jitesh Sharma, they've got some young guys coming in over there. Shikhar Dhawan might have a year or 2 left in him, just enough juice in him to go on for a little longer. So I think they are the most fixable out of these 3 teams. But then again, Punjab have made 2 playoffs in 15 tournaments or 16 tournaments. So that doesn't make for great reading.
No, I think here's my thought on them. And remember, I did very briefly work for this franchise. Not with the IPL, but with the ownership group who were involved with someone else. I just don't think they have the patience to. Everything you've just said, I think, is right, and it's basically what I said in the exit interview. If you have a look at I'll go through what I think the issues are with this team in a moment. But if you have a look at everything they've done, I think you'd be in a very good position to go, do you know what? Let's roll this back. Maybe go with my trading option of just going, okay, we don't really need we don't need Arshdeep and Sam Curran, for instance, could be one. We don't need Nathan Ellis and Rabada, whichever decision they make, right? And they make a call on that. I think they probably keep Sam Curran. I can't imagine he's going to bowl that bad again, but his batting was good. So you do it from that perspective. I think the problem is that they won't have that patience. I think they'll look at where they've come at the end of the year and they'll be like, oh, we did something wrong. We need to fix this. Whereas I don't think this is as bad as it has been in other years. Here's the one thing I did notice when I went through their team. So Shikhar Dhawan averages over 40 and Liam Livingstone averages 35. Sikandar Raza only played 7 games. He averaged 27. Sam Curran averaged 27. Those are 2 guys who are all-rounders. You don't really want them to be 3rd and 4th on your batting averages. You've then got Tader, who averaged 26. Simran, who averaged 26. And someone's actually asked this question. Here it is. Asked this question on Jitesh Sharma. Another one who's averaging, what's he averaging? 23, 24? Right?
What's he striking at though? Because his power game is good.
Oh no! I've got no problem with a lot of their striking rates. They're all. I don't think any of those players I've mentioned is under 130, and he's at 156. Simran's at 150. No problem with the striking. At a certain point, I do look at this and go, you've got 2 all-rounders giving you really good years with a bat, of which I think Sikandar Raza can probably do that again. But I don't know if they can fit him into the side because he can't bowl at this in this competition. Sam Curran. Who knows what's going to happen with Sam Curran now that he's not bowling as well? You've got a lot of guys who have played a lot of very good cameos, as you said, good power. Different parts of their game that I really I saw Simran's. Was it there? I'm trying to think. Was it his last score? Did he get retired out? Does that sound right?
He got it done recently.
Yeah. Did he get retired out in the game? Was I watching? I feel like there was a game where that happened at the end. Look, I think there's a lot of talent there. What I'm not seeing, though, is any player scoring over 370 runs. And I wonder if these players are those sorts of things. So when I ask, that's my question. It's not that I like Jitesh Sharma and I like Simran. I actually like Tader as well. And obviously Shikhar Dhawan is okay. But they need a couple of players to go supernova in the way that Jaswal has, right? In the way that the rest of the league has gone supernova.
Yeah.
I've watched these guys a fair bit. I happen to see, a bunch of their games towards the end of the year. That was my only concern, is whether you're going to see these players have the ability to score 450 plus run seasons. And I don't think they're going to get the same kind of impact from their all-rounders as they did this
They need a
year.
Rinku. Are you saying they need a Rinku?
I almost think they just need one other guy that they know is going to make 450 runs, and then you throw all the youngsters at it. It's not an easy player to find or anything like that. But, they made some mistakes this year as well. Matthew Short, I could have told anyone that had asked that one wouldn't have worked. But anyway, we're going to have a break here. Thank you to everyone. It was Tader. Sorry, someone said it was Tader that was retired out. I was trying to remember. I knew it was in their game that I was watching. That was a remarkable thing. I must have been with a couple of overs to go. Behram, and they needed like 20 runs and over, and he was fucking pissed at being taken off the field. This was not an Ashwin thing where he was like, guys, I don't think this is for me. Scoring 2 boundaries of all, which is basically what they needed at that point. This was a guy who was like, but there was no way they were going to get that score with him on the field. Anyway, we've got more stuff on the IPL. If you're listening on YouTube at the moment, we had the exit interview up today. We've got an exit interview coming up tomorrow, and then we have the first playoff game. The preliminary final. We'll have some stuff on that. So do check out the rest of that. But now we'll have a quick ad. And then after the ad will be some Ashes chat. Let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, people would ask my dad if he wanted me to be Viv Richards. And he always said no. He wanted me to be Boycott. Because apparently he liked boring things. But anyway, it turned out I could be neither. But thanks to Bodyline t-shirts, I can wear clothes showing both players. The Boycott Stick of Rhubarb is one of my favourite t-shirts. I really like the design. And it's not the only one I love. There's also a WG Grace one where he's in a pedalo. which is a part of my everyday wardrobe now. But there are heaps of other cool shirts on this site, and you can search for them by nations or type, and they seem to add to them all the time. I'm a big fan of the Court Marsh Bold Lily in the Australian collection, and there's also a lovely Morning Everyone in honour of Richie Benaud's great greeting. The English area has the Fast Leg Theory shirt, which I think is a ripper. There's a couple of great West Indian ones I love, including this simple Viv Richards design, and a couple of Kapil Dev t-shirts in the Indian section that I simply must have. I'm not saying that Bodyline t-shirts will have something that you would like, but I will say this: they got me to wear a Jeffrey Boycott inspired t-shirt. And that in itself is a minor miracle. All right, welcome back to the Uncovered podcast with Jarrod and Behram. Ashes. So we have a situation where Ollie Robinson, I think Dan Brady might have written a really interesting piece about this, where I think Robinson got Steve Smith out in a game. Was it Marnus? No, it was Marnus. He got him out in the game.
It was Marnus.
Yeah, and England fans suddenly got quite excited about that. And then the end of the game, Marnus Labuschagne made 100, and Ollie Robinson was heading off for scads for his ankle. We talked about this last week as well. We now know, we've been updated on the Jofra Archer situation. He won't be playing in the Ashes, probably won't be playing in the IPL. What's the other thing? The World Cup. After that as well. We already know that Ben Stokes is in a similar position. So Bredig, did you read the Dan Bredig piece at all?
I did not, but I read a few, I think it was Daily Mail or something, in which they just reported on whether or not, or whether he did have a sore ankle, Ollie Robinson, and he's had that for a bit. It seemed like no one really has any knowledge of this. Paul Farbre said that I'm not sure if the English team knows or not. Again, don't quote me on this because it's the Daily Mail, and I mean, you know, they can sometimes go towards the sensationalist side, but what I understood out of it is that they still don't know. They're waiting on scans. In fact, the scans were supposed to come today on Monday. So let's see if they have or they will. And I hope that for England's sake, Ollie Robinson is rearing to go, because he recently took a 7-fer. And with Jofra, you know, his elbow out again, and that's been a recurring issue for him. So thoughts and prayers. Hope he is able to play, international cricket again. And then you also got that Jimmy groin strain, right? I mean, of course, we will see Jimmy in this Ashes. But, you know, he's not going to be a part of the Ireland test. And he is a doubt for the first Ashes test. So these are massive scares. Now you're looking at Broad, Wokes, Mark Wood, who is always 50-50. Then you've got Matthew Potts and potentially Sam Curran. And all of a sudden, it doesn't look as threatening as England could have potentially been. And if you look at the flip side, you know, Steve Smith wasn't having a great time at Sussex, but he got a score. He got 89. Got LBW to Michael Neser, of course. I'll talk about him in a bit. Of course, I have to fill that Bharat void because you guys miss Bharat too much. So I'm going to go on a Michael Neser rant today. But Marnus is getting runs. He had a 170 not out in an earlier game. I reckon it was against Yorkshire. And now he's got another 100. And it's an Ashes year. Steve Smith is also playing county cricket. And on the flip side, England is, you know, getting injured. Ben Stokes, like you mentioned in a previous pod, does not have any gas left in his legs enough. He has a limited amount of deliveries left in international cricket or all of cricket. And then you've got Joe Root playing the IPL. So, I mean, things do not look optimal for England headed to the Ashes. And this is an Australian team, which I would say after perhaps the Ponting team, which went unbeaten for like 16 games or something, or 116 in a row. This might be the most threatening Aussie team since then, because they've got all bases covered. So, yeah, I would, if I were England, I would be scared.
Well, so the interesting thing about Brettig's piece is that he basically goes through, I can't remember how long, but he goes through a long period of time where he looks at all the different Ashes and how key injuries, it must be 2005, actually, it must be when McGrath stood on the ball, but he goes basically back to there and how many times that key injuries have actually changed what has gone on in the Ashes. And I think when you know, there have been certainly times when the Australian team's been slightly better. And certainly been times when the English team has been slightly better. But these two teams have been fairly similar for a long time. This isn't like, you know, when Australia dominated the Ashes, it was because they were professional and England had something called professionalism, but like literally it wasn't even a real system. That was completely different to now. And so, you know, not having one or two major bowlers. And I always think back to, everyone talks about how great Australia was in you know, in that period from 1995 through to, you know, 2008 or whenever it was, 2007. There was one series when India played really well, and I think Gillespie was the main bowler for Australia, and I think Warne and McGrath were out. And it's not talked about a lot. that series. The Indian players get a lot of credit for how well they batted in that series. But if you do take out, a couple of key players, and we are getting more towards the period of cricket where I think we will have these sort of, platoon of fast bowlers, and, the way that things move and everything else will change. But there's no doubt that in a lot of these series now, especially amongst the top teams, that one or two key injuries are, massively different. How many tests did Shaheen Afridi play in Pakistan when they lost to Australia and England and the whole New Zealand?
He played the Australian series, and then there was this Sri Lanka series, 2-match test series, in which he played superbly in the first game. Pakistan won that game, got injured, hasn't played a test match since, and Pakistan hasn't won a test match since. So there you have it.
And look, he obviously, that Australia series wasn't like the England series or even like the New Zealand series. It was a real arm wrestle, right? And he might not have made the difference in that, and Pakistan might have still ended up losing. But having him there is a completely different thing than having someone else who is not of that level. And it's something, you've been watching the playoffs at the moment, and obviously Denver Nuggets are my team. They're now favorites to win the whole playoffs. They probably, at this stage, are probably the most likely team to win the finals. But they haven't had an injury. Now, they would argue, well, the last 2 years, all we had was injuries coming into the playoffs, right? But that's how these things happen, and we don't judge them. This could be the ashes of, England. Probably, I would have said that Australia was a slight favorite even coming in, just because, as you said, I just think they have so many bases covered. But the more injuries we hear of, and I've said this before, if Ben Stokes doesn't bowl, I don't even know what England's best team is anymore. Right. I think the Bairstow thing is probably what's the best way of putting it? I think Bairstow coming in means that they can probably bat him at number 6, which allows for Sam Curran to bat at number 7, and they can then throw the ball to Stokes a couple of times as well if they have to. But suddenly it just doesn't look like the same kind of team that we saw not that long ago.
Also, I would like to add that Johnny Bairstow had all of his success in 2022 as a batter, as a frontline batter. And now you're making him keep wicket. And I think that is farcical, really, because you've got one of the best keepers in the world in Ben Foakes. He has the highest average, I reckon, in the last 10 years or so in England's test ranks as a keeper. And he's a brilliant keeper. And that's just one of those things where I feel like they might have, just been looking at the different avenues where they're going to get those overs from. Maybe that's what inspired that decision, because nothing else makes sense to me.
Yeah, I suppose the attacking nature is the other part of that, isn't it, though? That they think that Foakes doesn't attack the way that they want to, which is also
Ollie
fair
Pope
enough.
Zach Crawley gets another life. I mean, you open with Ollie Pope, then you go with the Popener. I don't know. You come up with something out of the box. It's England. I mean, Duckett could sit or rest in one game. I just wouldn't leave out Foakes, because I think you're messing up two things over there. You are depriving yourself from a world-class keeper, or the services of a world-class keeper, and then you're robbing one of the most belligerent test batters with the freedom to just think about his batting.
I think you're right. The one thing I would say about Bairstow is there was a point in his career when he first started dominating test batting, when he did have the gloves on. I don't think the issue has ever been gloves on, gloves off for him. There are players where that does have a bigger impact. I'm not saying it might be a slight impact. I don't think I think Johnny Bairstow's big thing is, does the England team love me and does everyone back me? And at times that has not been the case. Bairstow's big problem with batting was 100% of, what's the best way of putting this? He was batting in the side and batting at number 5 or number 6. And they brought in a specialist batter called Josh Butler, who was a wicketkeeper. And suddenly Bairstow's like, wait, what? And then obviously the whole thing with Ed Smith loving Josh Butler and all that sort of stuff, I think really did get to him quite a bit. We just had a super chat come in, and I think it's about the Ashes, isn't it? Oh, no. How does India... this is from Seb. Says, how does India overcome the issue of Indian expatriation? Isn't there a word? Isn't there...
Is it expectation?
It might be, but I'm trying to think. There's another. There's a word that means spitting, which is very close to that. Anyway, England have changed the fans' view of the Test team, accepting failure. Can India do the same? Look, you can't compare Indian cricket to English cricket. And remember that England got to the absolute lowest. When they lost to the West Indies over there, and they played dismal cricket as well. it was very easy. I've said India's problem over and over again is the fact that they've never played bad cricket. Indian fans talk about the Indian team like they play bad cricket, but they don't. They play really good cricket, and then occasionally it doesn't work when they need it to work. That's like 10 times harder than anything else. So I don't think that you're going to see a similar kind of change in cricket from that. We've had three major paradigm shifts in Test cricket. We don't know if the Bazball is a full paradigm shift yet, or if it's just England cricket, or whether it will fall apart. But I'm going to keep that as the third one. The other one was the West Indies, where basically the West Indies were embarrassed by India, where India was made 370 odd against their spinners. And they're like, well, our spinners isn't good enough. We're going to have to change. And the other one was where Australia sat around and went, we're not winning test matches like we should be because we're going a little bit too slow. So I do think from that perspective, it's a little bit different. I believe there are people in Indian cricket, T20, one day, and Test cricket who are all sitting there going, I think that there is no doubt that we can, what's the best way of putting it, completely change the way that we play cricket. But there's also as many people on the other side going, oh, don't do that. That will be absolutely terrible, and we might lose, and then it might not go very well. If you want to send anything through to me or Behram, while we're chatting directly on YouTube, remember the best way to get your question read is to do a super chat. We're going to have a quick break here, and then Behram's going to tell me all about the new Pakistani selectors, selection panel, the whole
selection committee.
All of them. A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be. And from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster or making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link. Welcome back to Uncovered. Jarrod Kimber and Behram Qazi here. Very, very quickly, I just wanted to mention Brian Booth, who was an Australian cricketer who passed away this week. Just because Brian Booth was a very, very good Test cricketer. He averaged 42 in the game, but he was also an Olympian. He represented Australia in hockey as well. And even though he was a batter, he sometimes bowled, but he bowled medium pace and spin at various times. So he was a proper kind of sort of a natural athletic sort of person. Just a fascinating cricketer if you get a chance to have a look at. Also, probably one of the most Christian cricketers, I think, that has ever represented Australia. Probably, I'm not sure if that makes him anti-sledging or anti-Australian cricketer, but I think he ended up being a reverend or a pastor later on in his career as well. So shout out to the Booth family. He was a fantastic cricketer for Australia. But, for me, it's the story of him being involved with two different sports, which I thought was really, really interesting and worth mentioning. Behram, a blogger was made a selector in Pakistan cricket this week. It's a fantastically weird situation. It looks like the most modern Pakistan selection committee that we've probably seen ever. And my first question to you is, how will it all fall apart?
Well, they keep doing unprecedented things. It's another first of its kind arrangement. And Hassan Chima and Rehan ul Haq, both of these guys, Rehan is the team manager. He's been with them for a series or two. And Hassan Chima was the data guy, right, for Islamabad. He's the number cruncher. And it is quite staggering that they've gone with this quite radical shift with respect to selection. It is exciting at the same time and is frightening as well, because anything with Pakistan cricket is frightening. But when you look at it from like a broader lens, what I see happening over here is that they have this cohort or ensemble in which they've got the coaches involved. So both Mickey and Bradburn, who are team director and head coach, of course, Grant Bradburn has been named head coach officially. So they are going to be part of the selection committee. Then you have Harun Rashid in the selection committee because you need to have one dinosaur and someone who needs to report back to Sethi. It doesn't work any other way.
The dinosaur quota in selection is one of the most important things you'll ever have.
It doesn't make sense without him because there needs to be an informer so that the chairman
Who else
can
is
have
going to
his
wear
say
the
as well.
blazer, man? Who else is going to wear... Hassan's not going to wear the blazer.
Absolutely not. But I mean, Harun Rashid seems like a decent bloke every time I've interacted with him. So, I hope that he gives these guys the liberty to go and do their thing. Because the way I see it, I look at Bradburn and Mickey Arthur, tell both Rehan and primarily Hassan Chima that, okay, we have all of these positions filled. We are looking for this type of player, this profile of cricketer. And can you crunch the numbers? Can you do a bit of analytics? Because his title, Hassan Chima's, is Secretary Selection Committee, because Harun Rashid is the chair, obviously. And then he's also manager of analytics and team strategy. So
I
they're
thought that was
throwing
really
team strategy.
interesting.
Yeah, they're throwing team strategy everywhere. Mickey had it in his job spec. Grant Bradburn is the head coach. Now Hassan Chima is manager, analytics, and team strategy. Will he be traveling with the team? Time will tell. But I think how they're going to use him is that they're going to say, okay, we need this profile of player. Give us the numbers, show us who can do this particular job for Pakistan. Because let's face it, like this is the most steady Pakistani unit in a while when it comes to limited overs cricket.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of holes to plug. It's minor tweaks here and there. And I think it makes sense for that particular reason. But does Hassan Chima have the knowledge for, under 19 selection? And can he manage the Shaheens? Because that's a lot of responsibility. You've got all of these 3 units for Pakistan, which are tiered, and then he's supposed to pick players who will be representing or will be participating in fast bowling and spin bowling camps soon. So I'm not sure if that is a skill set that is suited to Hassan Chima per se, but it's still exciting in the sense that, okay, it's a radical shift, but then what isn't in Pakistan cricket? It's always been that way.
The interesting thing
might work,
is...
and if it does work, it could be revolutionary, right? I mean, you've got 2 guys who have done it before for Islamabad United. So one can hope that they could do the same for Pakistan, but it can't possibly be that simple. I feel that all 4 of these guys, Rehan, Hassan, Bradburn, and Mickey Arthur, need to be talking to each other every day, and their communication needs to be like 100% aligned and crisp, because it cannot work otherwise.
I will say that the analytics is not they're not the sort of the first analytics people on selection committees. I think Nathan Lehman was certainly very heavily involved with England. If you work for a franchise, it's kind of part of the job, right? You don't have a proper selection committee at a franchise. It's the captain, it's the coach, it's if you've got multiple assistant coaches, and the analysts are usually involved in this. So it does happen more than I think people understand it. But, to have Hassan Chima be a person who writes blogs all the way through to being the selector of Pakistan, or the secretary of the selectors and the head of everything else. But also, this is the kind of job I've been talking about for years in cricket, which is what happened was originally is analytics came in and the analytics person was kept in the corner all the time. And I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was the Australian cricket team who would bring their analyst in when they needed stats. And I was like, at what stage do you not need stats? Like, you either need them or you don't, right? Like, that person should be involved. And it was certainly one of the major cricket teams. They should be part of the discussion, and all these things should be, but it's the professionalization of the sport. You just said, how can you be involved with the main team, the Shaheens, which is the A team, great name, and the under-19s, right? Here's the truth about selection committees. No one has ever been able to be on top of all those 3 different things, right? The difference now is that there is a system in place, and they have information being fed back to them, not just batting averages and bowling averages, but if they're lucky, they'll be able to get speed guns. They might be able to get rotations on the ball. They'll be able to get what this person averaged against a particular kind of bowling. They might be able to get information back on the pitches, all those sorts of things. In the old days, there's that great story, and I'm trying to remember when this was. It was 2009 Ashes, around that time, when Merv Hughes was asked about his job as a selector, and he basically said, when I'm at the grounds, I see lots of stuff, but I'm not a full-time, I don't get paid, so I'm not there that often. And they're like, what about watching it on TV? And he goes, oh yeah, I watch all the stuff in Australia, but I don't have cable TV, so I don't watch the team when they tour. That's where we were 15 years ago from Australia. right? So imagine what the hell, these other teams were doing at that stage. So I do think it was a very, very different perspective when you come to how that has been worked out. Look, I think it's fascinating. Obviously, I'll try and get my fellow blogger onto the podcast to speak about it. He probably won't be allowed now. Be gagged.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something in the contract, right?
Yeah.
But maybe there's not. Who knows? But one thing that I will say over here is that they are hyping up this new sort of mentality shift that they're wanting to bring to the Pakistan team. All four of these. Well, not Hassan, but Rehan has spoken about it. Mickey has spoken about it. Grant Bradburn has spoken about it. They're calling it the Pakistan way, in which they want the team to play an attacking brand of cricket where there is no fear of failure. And they are coupling that with basically clarity with respect to communication and implementation, such that, if I want to leave this ball, I'm leaving this ball. If I want to hit a six on this ball, I'm hitting a six on this ball. So there are a lot of vagaries in this, but there seems to be a conscious shift towards modern day cricket. Now, alluding to Seb's question earlier of why or if India could do it, I don't think it's going to be very straightforward for Pakistan, because Pakistani people are very reactionary, they're very emotional, and they're going to have their pitchforks out if the team doesn't perform.
Yeah.
If they try to hit out and get bowled out for like 50, no one's going to enjoy it one bit, and there will be a lot of pressure on the guys. So it's not that simple in the subcontinent, because over here this means a lot more to people, and it's unfortunate.
Also, just big fan bases, right? Big fan bases who expect success. I mean, have a look at the LA Lakers at the moment. So you've got one team in the Denver Nuggets playing against the LA Lakers. No, the Lakers won the title 3 years ago. Since then, they've gone through about 83 players, right? They've made so many mistakes, and a lot of those have been sometimes to placate the ego of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but sometimes they've been going for instant success. And they kept making mistakes. They've ended up with a really good team. Sadly for them, they've just come up against a slightly better team, and they won't be making it to the finals.
Well, according to Mickey Arthur, the culture is really important. So as per Mickey, even if you lose, but you have a culture in place, that is more beneficial in the long run as opposed to just losing or winning in the short term. But I think that there is some benefit in this. I really hope they're able to pull this off, because this heavily relies on their communication and the buy-in from the players. You have to remember, why does baseball work? Because every single player is bought into it. Joe Root speaks highly of it. Jimmy Anderson, I was reading that piece on Cricinfo. He is loving playing under Ben Stokes. He says Ben is the best captain he's played under. So you need that buy-in, and we all say, there should be no fear of failure, but Pakistani cricketers don't make a lot of money. If their place is under the scanner, they are going to go on in their shell, because this is their livelihood. So it's not that simple, but I do hope and wish them the best. If they manage to pull this off, this will be a coup in terms of shifting, the direction of Pakistan.
No, it's already a coup. I think it's already massive. One thing I would say is, when you do stuff like this, I think the one thing, and I think it was it Seb's question from before about, the expectation of different of the Indian
as Kumar
team.
Sangakkara put it in 2003, the weight of all these expectations.
Right? But look at what England did. The one thing that I thought they were very clever of, they basically just told everyone what they were going to do. And then they went out and did it. Now, that could have failed, and it could have gone really wrong. But at a certain point, you have to educate the audience as well, because you are literally saying, we are going to do something different here. And this is, I mean, I wrote about this in 2017, that I thought this is the kind of plan that Pakistani cricket needed. It's taken them 6 years to actually get to that point. But that it now needs to be, the media manager needs to be on board. So Sammy needs to be on board, right? The PCB management needs to be on board. Everyone.
Well, I think Sami Bernie is not in that role anymore.
Isn't
They're
he?
bringing in someone new. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
But you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. The social media person, right? Everyone needs to understand what the aim is here. The aim is not to win the next game. The aim is to be consistently good across 3 formats over a long period of time, and then breed us so that we go naturally back into that top 3 or top 4 teams. That's the aim. The aim is not winning a one-off game. And if you lose to, Zimbabwe on an away to a 1 game, it's not the end of the world, because this is what came out of it. If they don't do that, this doesn't last 2 years, because they're going to have a period where they don't win games, because I
feel like, unfortunately, if they crash out of the World Cup, if they don't make the semifinals, right, things could get dark really quickly, because everyone expects this. This is the first time Pakistan is going into an ODI World Cup where people have expectations of a semifinal. 99 was the last time, right? And that is what? I'm counting the years now.
It's a long time ago,
24
mate.
years ago. 24 years ago.
You
A
were
lot of
only
people.
you were barely 30 at that stage.
I was 5. So, I mean, that's the gravity of this. But yeah, I mean, I do think that they are clever minds, have good cricketing brains, and they brought data into Pakistan cricket. They are the pioneers of that in a way. And I think that's the beauty of franchise cricket, that it allowed them to have the liberty and freedom and also the responsibility of completely running Islamabad United, that now they have elevated this stature to a point where they have been selected for Pakistan. So I think that's great on both of those guys. Good job, Rehan and Hassan.
Swami Nathan has just sent through a super chat. He says, who replaces, well, basically all the India's best players when they retire. So, yeah, I mean, you're not, the most important thing here is, Swami Nathan, is that you don't replace like 5 guys. In fact, one of the best scenes that you will ever see about this, and it's a way that people now think about sport, but also in some ways kind of have always tried to think about it of one way or another, is the Moneyball scene where they're talking about replacing the 3-star players and they're trying to work out how to do it. Essentially, if I was doing that, I'd be looking at what individual skills each one of these players do. Do we need a Pujara in the future in order to bat up the order and take a lot of dot balls, especially in places like Australia? What is it that Virat Kohli specifically gives us? But more likely than that, what they're going to do is they're going to look at the next 5 or 6 best players. Obviously, Shubman Gill is probably inked in for one of those positions if he's not already. I'm trying to remember if he was in the last Test match, but the better things to do is to really look at what you need, because there's so much talent in Indian batting specifically at the moment. Although the bowlers are pretty good when they're fit too, but there's so much talent in Indian batting. If I was running that, I'd be like, okay, what kind of, and this, where India should be in a position going forward is to be very much like a franchise or a professional football team or something like that, where they can go, okay, the coach wants us to play this style of cricket. We have this amount of talent. What are the players that best match what the coach wants to do? Which actually goes back to that conversation about Pakistan, right? Which is that's what you should be doing. We want to play this brand of cricket. It doesn't mean that people who don't ever play that brand of cricket don't particularly fit into it. But, let's say Rahul Dravid's like, I want one attacking opener and one defensive opener, right? I want a defensive number 3 and attacking number 4. I want my number 5 to be able to play in India. I want him to be the best player of spin in the world. And outside of India, I want someone who can handle the short ball. Whatever that may be, whatever kind of plan they're looking at, that's what they should be looking at. But individual players, there's, Jaiswal probably goes to the top of that list now as well. Rinku Singh might pop in as well. Rishabh Pant.
Yes, cricket though. He's not replacing Pujara.
Well, but he doesn't have to replace Pujara. He might bat at number 5 or number 6. The point is that I think there's lots of talent out there.
Shreyas Iyer is one. I think Shreyas Iyer has a very good
Shreyas Iyer is a perfect. I've talked about him so much. The man just needs to play outside of India. That's all that he needs to do. But I don't think the talent is a problem there from that perspective. All right, let's just finish up. Okay, so IPL. What have you got for me? I haven't looked really at the finals yet. In fact, I was going to sit down and do that tonight and have a good long look at it. The first game is Lucknow, Mumbai. No. First game is Titans. Chennai. Who have you got in that one?
I have got the Gujarat Titans making the final once again, and I've got good reason for this. I mean, they've got the 2 highest wicket takers of the tournament. You've got Mohammad Shami, who is at 24 wickets, and then Rashid Khan at 24. Both of them at 24 wickets. But then you have to remember that the qualifiers in Chepauk. It's in Chennai, and that is going to be Chennai's home ground, but also a surface on which Rashid will be licking his lips. And then Shubman Gill is in the form of his life, second highest run scorer, back-to-back hundreds. And you've got these X-factor players in Gujarat, right? You've got your Hardik Pandyas, your David Millers. Even Tewatia would fall under that category. Vijay Shankar showed you that he can do a job in the recent game. But I will say this, that the Chennai crowd is known to back their team very, very well.
To be fair,
to play at home.
Chennai has become the Indian team at the moment because they haven't played in a away game yet. There's been Chennai fans everywhere. So They're going to have a lot of support at home, but they have a lot of support everywhere.
But what's working for them is that their opening partnership is doing well. Conway in particular, and then Gaikwad has also gotten some runs. And their Sri Lankan duo of Theekshana and Pathirana, they are, you need to look out for those guys. I think Pathirana in particular has been very, very impressive. And then Deepak Chahar is back in form. He has been a star for Chennai in the past. and he's got 10 wickets in 4 games, in his last 4 games. I have Gujarat sneaking away with a win in this one just because of Rashid Khan. I think that on this surface, he's going to wreak havoc. But I think that Chennai have what it takes to win as well. I mean, Gujarat are not invincible. I'm more interested in the other game because Lucknow has a lot of flaws. I feel like they would have lost that previous game had it not been for Nicholas Pooran, who came in lower order, struck like 58 off 30 balls. And then Ravi Bishnoi. I think that is a very, very important play for Lucknow because he's a wrist spinner. It's going to be Chipok. And again, Jarrod, another play that Punjab should not have let go. So they're up against Mumbai. Mumbai have been patchy. Bowling's not been great. But then Rohit Sharma finally got a score, right? 56 of 37 or something like that. And then you've got a ton for Cam Green. 47 deliveries. Comes down, first drop, new batting position, and then scores
better
that ton.
Where he should be batting. There's a guy on the Discord, and I've forgotten his name, but he's been asking me, he might have even asked me this on some of the Wagon Wheel podcasts about it over and over again. And I said from the start, he either needs to open or he needs to bat at number 3. Like, it's just, you look at his cricket and it doesn't make any sense. So I think CSK lost the game. I was doing power rankings one day and I was going to have them at number 1. And while I was writing them down as number 1, they lost that game. I can't remember who that was to. It was only a couple of games back.
I think it might have been KKR, maybe.
Was that game? Yeah. I know it was recent anyway. It's not that I think they're massively better than Gujarat. I think they're very similar to each other. So I think that's a fascinating game. Mumbai has a negative net run rate. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did actually. I saw it the other day when I was looking at the permutations.
I don't think it'll matter, though. Talked about, well, it doesn't matter, but what it tells you over a 14-game series, though, is that they have been very, very good when they've won, but also probably very, very bad when they've lost. Which means that's a dangerous team to play in a knockout game, right?
I don't think Mumbai have defeated Lucknow in this season, so that's an interesting one. But really, it comes down to whether or not Sky has a good game, doesn't it? I mean, let's be honest.
It could, although, yeah, most probably. Anyway, we're going to take a break. We're going to take a really long break, like a week-long break, and we'll be back next week on Uncovered. Thank you very much to Behram. Remember, you can find him on Twitter at DefMango, and I'm everywhere all at once. I've got plenty of IPL content and then heaps of test match content coming up as well. So we'll be talking to you very soon, but thank you very much. And remember, support the show with the likes and the comments and the subscribing and all the other things that people say on all these things. Behram's pointing down. You know what I'm saying from that point of view. But we'll see you again next time. If you like what we are making here and you want to know if you can help out, well, you can. On top of asking super chats on our lives, you can also support us through Patreon or buy me a coffee. The more support we can get, the better and more videos we can make. On Patreon, there are plenty of other things we offer too, like a Discord server, the chance to ask questions directly, AMAs, and early versions of our recordings. This channel only exists because people like you help support it. We have to buy equipment, software, pay wages, and my mortgage, I suppose, just to make this stuff happen. And if you don't have any money available to spend, it isn't just your money we want. Shares, likes, retweets, comments, subscriptions, the little bell icon thing, all of it. They help us build and become more professional, make more videos, better videos, all that sort of stuff. So thank you for watching everything we make and for all your support so far.